The last dying moments of President Ronald Reagan. Ronald Wilson Reagan, February the 6th, 1911 to June the 5th, 2004, was an American politician and actor who served as the 40th President of the United States from 1981 to 1989. Before his presidency, he was the 33rd Governor of California from 1967 to 1975, after a career as a Hollywood actor and union leader. Reagan was initially a Democrat, but he became a conservative and switched to the Republican Party in 1962. When Reagan finally left office in 1989, he held an approval rating of 68%. Matching those of Franklin D. Roosevelt. He was the first president since Dwight D. Eisenhower to serve 2 full terms after a succession of 5 prior presidents had failed to do so. Although he had planned an active post-presidency, Reagan disclosed in 1994 that he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease earlier that year. He appeared publicly for the last time at the funeral of Richard Nixon. He died 10 years later, in 2004, at the age of 93. The Christian faith. In the faith of Ronald Reagan, Mary Beth Brown makes the case that the secret ingredient to Reagan's astonishingly successful presidency was his deep Christian faith. And he had good reason to have faith, surviving an assassination attempt and several illnesses. He had more than one near-death experience in which he appears to have communicated with angels, spirit helpers. Furthermore, according to Paul Kenger, Reagan had a particularly strong faith in the goodness of people. I know in my heart that man is good, that what is right will always eventually triumph, and that there is purpose and worth to each and every life. His faith stayed with him his entire life. In 1984, Reagan asked Congress, why can't the freedom to acknowledge God be enjoyed again by children in every schoolroom across the land? In 1987, Reagan renewed his call for Congress to support voluntary prayer in schools and end the expulsion of God from America's classrooms. Ronald Reagan. A time for choosing. The Founding Fathers knew a government can't control the economy without controlling people. And they knew when a government sets out to do that, it must use force and coercion to achieve its purpose. So we have come to a time for choosing. You and I are told we must choose between a left or right. I suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There is only an up or down. Up to man's age-old dream, the maximum of individual freedom consistent with order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism. Family. Ronald Reagan was born in an apartment on the second floor of a commercial building. His father's grandparents were Irish Catholic immigrants from County Tipperary, and his mother was half English and half Scottish. Reagan took a screen test in 1937 that led to a 7-year contract with Warner Brothers Studios. By the end of 1939, he had already appeared in 19 films. In 1938, Reagan co-starred in the film Brother Rat with actress Jane Wyman, 1917 to 2007. Together they had 2 children, Maureen and Christine, who only lived one day, and adopted a third, Michael. Mrs. Reagan in 1976 with Michael and Maureen. Although they divorced in 1949, they continued to be friends until his death, with Wyman saying, "America has lost a great president and a great, kind and gentle man." Reagan married Nancy Davis in 1952. They had 2 children, Patty and Ronald, or Ron Jr., here with his wife. The Reagans' relationship was close, authentic, and intimate. He once wrote to her, "Whatever I treasure and enjoy, all would be without meaning if I didn't have you." In 1998, Nancy told Vanity Fair, "Our relationship is very special. We were very much in love and still are. When I say my life began with Ronnie, well, it's true, it did. I can't imagine life without him." The Faith of Ronald Reagan by Mary Beth Brown. Reagan's brain had been destroyed by Alzheimer's after over a decade of suffering from the disease. He had not been able to recognize his wife Nancy for a number of years. He could no longer talk, walk, or feed himself. Then, on June 5th, 2004, at 93 years of age, after being in a coma for several days, Reagan miraculously opened his eyes. He then rose, stared for a while directly into Nancy's eyes for one last look of deep acknowledgement, then took his last breath and died. Reagan's daughter Patty told People magazine, "At the last moment when his breathing told us this was it, he opened his eyes and looked straight at my mother. Eyes that hadn't opened for days did. And they weren't chalky or vague. They were clear and blue and full of love. And they closed with his last breath. If a death can be lovely, his was." Patty and her brother Ron were standing next to their father's bed when the astonishing interchange between their parents took place. "In his last moment, he taught me that there is nothing stronger than love between 2 people, 2 souls. It was the last thing he could do to show my mother how intertwined their souls are, and it was everything." The deathbed phenomena experienced by Reagan during his end-of-life coma is known in the medical literature as terminal lucidity. It is considered by parapsychologists as evidence suggesting the mind can function without a brain. and therefore evidence suggesting survival of consciousness after death. Terminal lucidity often comes as a complete surprise to those who attend the dying, and the dying person may appear completely restored to mental health for even minutes and hours before death. According to terminal lucidity pioneer researcher Michael Nahm, the most remarkable cases involve patients whose brains were destroyed by diseases such as tumours and Alzheimer's disease, but who seemed to recover shortly before death, with their memory being intact. He defines terminal lucidity as the re-emergence of normal or unusually enhanced mental abilities in dull, unconscious, or mentally ill patients shortly before death, including considerable elevation of mood and spiritual affectation, or the ability to speak in a previously unusual, spiritualized, and elated manner.